Hey friends, I'm Miss B. In this story, Gilbert plays a prank on April Fool's Day by pretending it's a no-school day. No More School, April Fools by Dan Gutman. Pictures by Jim Palet. Chapter 1. Miss Banks pulls another prank. My name is AJ, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about snakes, because that's what I'm thinking about. I saw a picture of a snake that swallowed a whole bunny. You could see that the shape of the bunny in the middle of the snake. It was gross. I've heard that snakes can swallow alligators, pigs, and even cows. Do you think a snake could swallow a kid? I don't want to be that kid. I'm afraid of snakes. My point is, it was Friday morning. Mrs. Banks walked into the class with a smile on her face. "Good morning, students," she said. "It's time to mold young minds." "Ugh, disgusting," I shouted. "I don't want my mind molded. If you want to mold something, get a tub of Play-Doh." "Do you know what today is?" asked Miss Banks. "What's today?" asked Ryan, who will eat anything, even stuff that isn't food. "It's National Standing Day," said Miss Banks. "National Standing Day?" asked Alexia, this girl who rides a skateboard all the time. "What's that?" "It's a day when we celebrate standing," Miss Banks replied. "I never heard of National Standing Day," whispered Andrea Young, this annoying girl with curly brown hair. "Me neither," whispered Emily, who never hears about anything unless Andrea hears about it first. "Everybody, get out of your seats and stand up," said Miss Banks. We got out of our seats and stood up. We pledged the allegiance. We did the word of the day. Miss Banks told us to keep standing to celebrate National Standing Day. So we did math standing up. Then we did social studies standing up. I was getting tired of standing up. It felt like we were standing for 1,100,000 hours. "Can we sit down now?" asked Michael, who never ties his shoes. "No," said Miss Banks. "Do we have to stand up all day?" asked Neil, who we call the nude kid even though he wears clothes. "Of course," replied Miss Banks. "National Standing Day goes on all day long. It's a national holiday." "I think it's a dumb holiday," I say. "They don't have National Kneeling Day or National Leaning Against a Wall Day." Actually, those holidays would be cool. But Miss Banks came over to my desk. She looked mad. I thought she might send me to the principal's office. But suddenly, Miss Banks broke out in a big grin. "Just kidding," she said. "There's no such thing as National Standing Day. You can all sit down now." "What?" Miss Banks pulls lots of pranks. "Ha ha ha," she said, laughing her head off. "I got you good. Time is fun when you're having flies." Grr. Chapter 2. Payback Time. We were on the playground at recess hanging on the monkey bars. Why did they call them monkey bars? I've never seen any monkeys in the playground. Anyway, we were all pretty mad about what happened in Chapter 1. "I can't believe Miss Banks got us again," said Ryan. "She's always pulling pranks on us," said Michael. "And we always fall for them," said Neil. "Miss Banks is mean," said Alexia. "We're not going to take it." "Do you know what we should do?" asked Andrea. "We should pull a prank on Miss Banks." "That's right," said Emily, who always thinks Andrea's right. I was surprised that Andrea wanted to pull a prank on Miss Banks. Andrea never breaks the rules. She never does anything that might get herself in trouble or prevent her from getting into Harvard someday. Andrea must have been pretty mad about Miss Banks' constant pranking. "It's payback time," Alexia said. "What prank should we pull on Miss Banks?" "How about we tell her it's National Sitting Day," suggested Neil, "so we can sit down for the rest of the day." "We sit down every day," Andrea pointed out. "How about we put bubble wrap under the rug," suggested Ryan, "so when she steps on it, it'll pop and freak her out." "She already did that to us," said Andrea. "Remember?" "How about we let the air out of the tires on her car," suggested Michael. "That might be illegal," Ryan said. "We could go to jail." "I don't want to go to jail," Emily whined. She looked like she might start crying, as usual. "Nobody's going to jail," Andrea assured Emily. "We need to come up with the perfect prank. We needed a prank that would get Miss Banks good, but wouldn't put us in jail." We thought and thought and thought. I thought so hard I thought my brain was going to explode. That's when I came up with the greatest prank in the history of the world. "I have an idea," I whispered, so nobody else would hear. "When Miss Banks goes to write something on the board, we should all turn our chairs and desks around so we're facing the back of the room. That would be hilarious." "Actually, that's not a bad idea," said Andrea. "Ooh," said Ryan. Andrea likes AJ's idea. They must be in love. "When are you going to get married?" asked Michael. "If those guys weren't my best friends, I would hate them." Miss Binks will be totally surprised, said Neil. I should get the Nobel Prize for my great idea. That's a prize they give out to people who don't have bells. After recess, we went back to the classroom and took our seats. We were all giggling in anticipation of our great prank. This afternoon, Miss Binks told us, we're going to learn about the digestive system. It includes the parts of the body that turn foods and liquids into the fuel our bodies need, blah, 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 blah. She went on and on. We waited for her to write on the board so we could turn our chairs and desks around. The parts of the digestive system, continued Miss Binks, are the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the intestines, and blah, 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 blah. The digestive system is really gross. I waited for Miss Binks to turn around and draw a picture of a stomach or something on the whiteboard. But she didn't do it. She just kept talking. It felt like we were waiting 1,000,000 hours. Finally, Miss Binks looked at her watch and told us she had to step out of the room for a minute. Now, I shouted, as soon as she walked out the front door of the class. We all rushed to turn our desks and chairs around until we were facing the back of the room. Everybody was giggling. This is going to be great, whispered Alexia. That's when the weirdest thing in the history of the world happened. The back door of the classroom opened, and Miss Binks walked in. As I was saying, she said, the first stage of the digestive process is chewing. When you chew food, it gets broken into smaller pieces and blah, 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 blah. What? She just went on talking about the yucky digestive system as if we hadn't pulled off the greatest prank in the history of pranks. She turned our prank around and pranked us. Then something even weirder happened. The front door of the classroom opened and our principal, Miss Stoker, walked in. She looked around and saw us all facing the wrong direction, with Miss Binks teaching from the back of the room. What's going on? Asked Miss Stoker. Oh, said Miss Binks, I stepped out of the room for a moment and the students turned their desks around, so I thought I'd teach them from the back of the room. We were trying to prank her, admitted Andrea. But she pranked us instead, muttered Neil. Miss Stoker shook her head, sighed, and walked out of the room. A few minutes later, an announcement came over the loudspeaker. All fourth grade classes, report to the all-purpose room. Uh-oh, we're in trouble now, said Ryan. Chapter 3, A Teachable Moment. Before she was our principal, Miss Stoker was a stand-up comedian. She's always cracking jokes, but not this time. When we got to the all-purpose room, she was standing on the stage with a serious look on her face. Everybody was buzzing, but not like bees, that would be weird. I knew what Miss Stoker was going to tell us. She was going to say that pulling pranks can be dangerous. Somebody could get hurt, stuff like that. Grown-ups hate it when kids pull pranks. We might get suspended, said Neil. She's going to hang us upside down, I asked. No, dumbhead, said Neil. We might get kicked out of school. Oh, I knew that. Miss Stoker held up her hand and made a peace sign, which means shut up. Simmer down, she said. We simmered down. It has come to my attention, she began. Uh-oh. Anytime a grown-up says something that has come to their attention, you know you did something wrong. That's the first rule of being a kid. It has come to my attention that the fourth graders like to pull pranks on their teacher. Here it comes, whispered Alexia. We're going to jail. And I want to tell you, continued Miss Stoker, that I think that's great. What? You liked our prank? I shouted. Yes, replied Miss Stoker. You kids thought about your prank. You planned it out. You worked together as a group. You used critical thinking skills and blah, blah, blah. This is a teachable moment. Ugh, grown-ups love teachable moments. You kids have given me an idea, continues Miss Stoker. April Fool's Day is next Friday. To celebrate, we're going to have a week-long contest between the students and the teachers at elementary school to see who can pull the best pranks. We call it the Prank War. Everybody started buzzing again. Having a prank war sounded like a great idea. I started thinking about all the pranks we could pull on Miss Binks. This was going to be fun. But then I remembered something. Teachable moments are never fun. They're just another way for grown-ups to trick us into learning stuff. What a scam. What's in it for us? I shouted. Well, said Miss Stoker, if you students win the prank war, we'll have a big candy party. What do you say to that? Yay, we all shouted, which is yay backward. And if the teachers win the prank war, said Miss Stoker, they'll get a hot tub for the teacher's lounge. Wow, all the teachers shouted, which is mom upside down. And to get everybody in the spirit of the prank war, said Miss Stoker, on April Fool's Day, I will wear a fake nose and glasses. A fake nose and glasses? That sounded kind of lame to me. That's all you're going to do? Somebody shouted. Yes, said Miss Stoker. It will be funny. Not to me. Our old principal, Mr. Klutz, used to do cool stuff to get us into the spirit of things. You should paint your head orange, shouted Michael. Mr. Klutz did that one time. Remember when he climbed up the flagpole? Asked Neil. He hung there upside down just like Uncle Sam. That was hilarious, said Ryan. Remember when he kissed a pig on the lips? Mr. Klutz was nuts. One time he married a turkey. That was before he retired. He was so funny, whispered Andrea. Mrs. Stoker could never fill his shoes. Huh? That's also huh backward. Why would you want to fill somebody's shoes? What would you fill them with anyway? Everybody was buzzing until Miss Stoker told us to simmer down. I'm sorry, she said, but I'm not Mr. Klutz, and I'm not doing any of those things. Boo! Everybody started booing. Well, what do you want me to do? Miss Stoker asked. You could sit in a shopping cart like a baby and we could push you around the school, suggested Neil. I'm not doing that, said Miss Stoker. You could see how many hot dogs you can eat in 5 minutes, suggested Michael. I'm not doing that either, said Miss Stoker. You could dye your hair green, suggested Alexia. No way I'm doing that, said Miss Stoker. You don't want to do anything fun, somebody shouted. You're no fun at all. No fun at all, everybody started chanting. No fun at all. No fun at all. Chanting is cool. It almost doesn't matter what you chant. Hey, I'm fun, Miss Stoker insisted. I'm lots of fun. I'm a comedian. How about I tell you a few jokes to show you how much fun I am? No, everybody shouted. Miss Stoker's jokes are terrible. If you were really fun, I said, you would bungee jump off the roof while wearing a pink tutu. That would get us in the spirit of the prank war. Yeah, everybody agreed. Bungee, 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 everybody chanted. Mrs. Stoker took a deep breath and let out a sigh. Okay, she finally agreed. I'll do it. Yay! Chapter 4. Let the prank war begin. Over the weekend, we got together to think of some cool pranks to pull on Miss Banks. Ryan said we should glue some coins to the floor and watch when she tries to pick them up. Neil said we should put confetti in her umbrella so when she opens it, the confetti will go flying all over. Michael said we should call her cell phone and ask if her refrigerator is running. When she says yes, we should tell her, you'd better go catch it. We have lots of good ideas. When we got to school on Monday morning, there was a big whiteboard next to the front office. It looked like a scoreboard with teachers on the left side and students on the right side. The gang and I were walking down the hallway to class when we saw Miss Banks. Are you kids ready for the prank war? She asked us. Oh yeah, I replied. The teachers are going down. I don't think so, said Miss Banks. I was talking with some of the other teachers over the weekend, and we really want that hot tub. Well, you're not going to get it, Ryan told her. The teachers are old and tired. We're kids, so we're young and full of energy. Yeah, added Michael, and we can't delay our gratification. Miss Banks stopped and turned to us. You think some snot-nosed kids are going to beat the teachers? She asked. No way. We've had years of experience pulling pranks on kids. Yeah, hundreds of years, I added. Oh, snap, said Ryan. May the better team win, Miss Banks replied. Principal Stoker was walking right behind us, and I guess she heard what we were saying. Enough trash talk, she told us. We still have to do our regular schoolwork this week. Don't forget that. We walked into our classroom. Everybody put their backpacks in their cubbies. Before we start the prank war, said Miss Banks, who wants a piece of sponge cake? I do. I do. In case you were wondering, everybody wanted sponge cake. Of course. Sponge cake is my favorite kind of cake. Miss Banks handed out paper plates and napkins to all of us and opened a cake box on her desk. I was about to take a piece of cake. Then I stopped. Hey, wait a minute, I said. I remember the time you offered us brownies, but you didn't have any brownies. You had a plate with brown letter E's cut out of paper. You said they were brownies, so no thanks. I don't want any sponge cake. That's right, said Alexia. You offered us donuts, but it turned out that they were veggies. Yeah, we're not falling for that old trick again, said Andrea. Nice try. Suit yourself, Miss Banks told us. That just means more sponge cake for me. She put a piece of sponge cake on a plate and started eating it. She closed her eyes and sighed. Yum, she said. I love sponge cake. So do I. Watching Miss Banks eat, I could almost taste the sponge cake. It sure looks like sponge cake, said Emily. Emily was right. The cake looked like real sponge cake, and it looked delicious. It had pink icing and sprinkles on top. My mouth was watering, but not really. How would you water a mouth? There's got to be a trick, said Michael. She's pranking us again. What trick? Miss Banks asked as she took another bite of sponge cake. Look at it. Smell it. Do you promise that this is sponge cake? Asked Andrea. I promise, said Miss Banks. It's 100% real, genuine sponge cake. Well, okay, I said. Miss Banks put pieces of sponge cake on paper plates and passed them around. I picked up the sponge cake. I bit into the sponge cake. Ugh, it was horrible. I couldn't even chew it. I spit a mouthful of icing out on my plate. What is this? I asked, wiping my mouth. I already told you, said Miss Banks. It's sponge cake. It's a cake made out of sponges. Get it? Sponge cake? Ah ha ha. Oh, I got you good. She pranked us again. While we were spitting out the awful sponge cake, Miss Banks called the front office on the intercom. Put it up on the scoreboard, Miss Stoker, she shouted. I just scored a pointer for the teachers. I thought Ryan might actually eat Miss Banks' fake sponge cake. He'll eat anything. Wait a minute, said Andrea. If your sponge cake is just cake made out of sponges, what were you eating? I saw you swallow it. Oh, said Miss Banks, I got one piece of regular sponge cake for myself and just made your pieces out of sponges. Not fair, shouted Neil. You're a teacher, said Alexia. When a teacher tells us something, we believe it. Everybody was upset that Miss Banks had pranked us again. That's when the weirdest thing in the history of the world happened. But I'm not going to tell you what it was. Okay, I'll tell you. But you have to read the next chapter. So, na, boo, boo, on you. Chapter 5. Ring! Suddenly, a bell in the hallway started ringing really loud. The bell in our school sounds like the word bring. Nobody knows why. Bring! Everybody was alarmed. It must be a fire drill, said Andrea. We need to walk outside in a single file. It can't be a fire drill, said Miss Banks. They always tell the teachers in advance when they're going to do a fire drill, so we don't schedule a test at that time. Maybe it's a tornado drill, suggested Ryan. Every so often we have a tornado drill. No, it's not a tornado drill, said Miss Banks. Bring! Then our librarian, Miss Rupee, poked her head into the doorway. Flood drill, she shouted. Next she went down the hall shouting to all the other classes, Flood drill, flood drill. I never heard of a flood drill. Flash floods can be very dangerous, said Andrea, who thinks she knows everything. I saw an article that said you can't see a flash flood coming until it's right on top of you. Then it's too late. Bring! Andrea's right, said Miss Banks. Everybody take off your shoes and socks and roll up your pant legs. Bring! We all rushed to take off our shoes and socks. Grab a notebook and climb up on your desk, said Miss Banks. The water might get high in here. If it's a big wave, ride your desk like a surfboard. You can use your notebook as a paddle. I grabbed my notebook and I climbed up on my desk. Miss Banks got a box of straws from her drawer, gave a straw to each of us. If the water is over your head, she said, you can breathe through the straw like a snorkel. Put it in your mouth. That was pretty smart, I had to admit. The bell stopped ringing, and you'll never believe who walked into the door at that moment. Nobody. It would hurt if you walked into a door, but you'll never believe who walked into the doorway. It was Miss Stoker. Why are you all standing on your desk, she asked. And what's with the straws? It's a flood drill, I told her. We're going to ride our desks like surfboards, said Michael, and breathe through straws if the water is over our head. Mrs. Stoker slapped her knees and doubled over laughing. There's no such thing as a flood drill, she told us. That's hilarious. I got you kids again, shouted Miss Banks. Ha ha ha, I can't believe you fell for that. That's the oldest prank in the book. I'll put another point on the scoreboard for the teachers, said Miss Stoker. Grrr. Chapter 6. She's gonna freak out. The score was 2-0. The teachers were winning, but there was plenty of time for us to catch up. After school, we didn't go right home. We snuck out to the playground to plan a strategy. We had to think of some great pranks to pull on Mrs. Banks, or we'd never get a candy party. Okay, said Andrea. Let's put our heads together. I'm not putting my head next to your head, I told Andrea. It's just an expression, Arlo, said Andrea, who calls me by my real name because she knows I don't like it. Can you two stop arguing for once? Asked Alexia. We have bigger fish to fry. Huh? I was going to ask Alexia what fish had to do with anything, but we had more important things to worry about, like coming up with great pranks to pull on Miss Banks. What if we wrapped up her cell phone with rubber bands, suggested Michael. Boring, I groaned. What if we stuck Post-it notes all over her car, suggested Ryan. Nah, I muttered. What if we put an out-of-order sign on the door to the teacher's bathroom, said Neil. Snooze fest, I said. There were a bunch of dumb ideas. Is Miss Banks afraid of anything? Asked Alexia. Bugs, Neil said. Remember when she told us how much she hates insects? Yeah. I have an idea, said Andrea, all excited. I can make some bugs out of chocolate and we can put them on her desk when she's not looking. You know how to make chocolate bugs? Alexia asked. Sure, Andrea replied. I took a baking class after school. They taught us how to make all kinds of things out of chocolate. Of course. Andrea takes classes in everything after school. That's a great idea, said Emily, who thinks all Andrea's ideas are great. But for once in her life, Emily was right. Putting chocolate bugs on Miss Banks' desk was a great idea. If she's really afraid of insects, she'll probably jump 3 feet in the air when she sees her desk covered with them. We rushed to get to school early on Tuesday morning so we would be in the class before Miss Banks showed up. Andrea brought a box filled with chocolate cockroaches, spiders, flies, and ants. They looked really real. Everybody was giggling as we spread the bugs out on Miss Banks' desk. "She's going to freak out when she sees this," said Michael. "It's going to be great," said Ryan, rubbing his hands together. "Finally, the shoe will be on the other foot," said Alexia. Huh? What do shoes have to do with anything? Why is everybody always talking about shoes? We put our backpacks in our cubbies and rushed to our seats. I couldn't wait to see the look on Miss Banks' face when she saw bugs crawling on her desk. A few minutes later, she came into the classroom. "Good morning," she said. She hung up her coat. She opened the window. She looked at the clock. The suspense was killing me. Finally, Miss Banks went over to her desk. "Oh, look," she said. "I love chocolate bugs. Time is fun when you're having flies." Then she popped some bugs in her mouth. Grr. Chapter 7, The Secret Swimming Pool. We tried everything to prank Miss Banks. We put signs on both classroom doors that said, "Door is broken. Use other door." She just climbed in through the window. We tried to play the why game. That's when you keep asking why whenever a grown-up says anything. But Miss Banks played the because game right back at us. Every time we tried to pull a prank on Miss Banks, she would pull one back on us instead. The other 4th grade classes weren't doing much better. By lunchtime on Wednesday, the scoreboard near the front office said teachers 12, students 4. The teachers were clobbering us. We needed to do something and fast. We were running out of time. During lunch period, we held an emergency meeting in the vomitorium. "We should pull a prank with balloons," suggested Andrea. "No snakes," Michael said. "Like we could put a snake in Miss Banks' desk drawer. That would totally freak her out." "I hate snakes," I said. "Where would we get snakes anyway?" asked Alexia. "From rent-a-snake," said Ryan. "You can rent anything." "Balloons," insisted Andrea. "Snakes," insisted Michael. Lunch period was over, and we couldn't agree on a prank. We went back to the class. That's when the weirdest thing in the history of the world happened. Miss Banks walked into the room. Well, that's not the weird part because Miss Banks walks into the room all the time. The weird part was that she was wearing a bathing suit. "What? Why are you wearing a bathing suit, Miss Banks?" asked Emily. "Oh," Miss Banks replied as she dried her hair with a towel. "I just got back from a swim." "Where'd you go swimming?" asked Andrea. "In the teacher's lounge," she replied. "What? There's a swimming pool in the teacher's lounge?" Neil asked. "Didn't anybody tell you?" Miss Banks said. "It was installed over the summer." I thought about that. Was there really a swimming pool in the teacher's lounge, or was Miss Banks just pranking us again? "There's no swimming pool in the teacher's lounge," insisted Alexia. "Sure there is," said Miss Banks. "We swim laps and play water polo after you kids go home every day. That's why we want to win the hot tub. It would feel so good to come out of the swimming pool and get into a hot tub." Well, she was right about that. Hot tubs are great. It was time to go phys ed, so we walked 1,100,000 miles to the gym. When we passed the art room, our teacher, Miss Hannah, was wearing a bathing suit too, and she was holding a beach ball. When we passed the music room, our teacher, Mr. Loring, was wearing a bathing suit and flip-flops, and was holding a boogie board. And there was a clothesline outside the music room with towels and goggles hanging on it. "Hi, Mr. Loring," Miss Banks said as we passed him. "Hello, Miss Banks," he replied. "Are you coming to the staff's pool party after school today?" "You bet," said Miss Banks. This was getting weird. "Hey," whispered Ryan. "Maybe there is a swimming pool in the teacher's lounge." "How come the teachers get a swimming pool and we don't?" whispered Neil. "It's not fair." "That's ridiculous," whispered Andrea. "Nobody has a swimming pool. They're just trying to prank us again." "You've never been inside the teacher's lounge," Alexia said to Andrea. "You don't know for sure. Maybe they do have a swimming pool." "There's one way to find out," I whispered. "We should sneak into the teacher's lounge after school." "Yeah!" When the dismissal bell rang, we got our backpacks and said goodbye to Miss Banks. But instead of going home, we hid behind the back door to the school. I put a rock next to the door so it wouldn't close and lock behind us. We waited a few minutes, and then we snuck back inside the school. We slinked down the hall, hugged the walls like secret agents. "Follow me," I said. "Shh," said Alexia. "We should synchronize our watches," whispered Michael. "That's what secret agents do in the movies." "I don't have a watch," Neil whispered. "None of us have watches," whispered Emily. "Shh," said Alexia. Finally, we reached the teacher's lounge. "This will prove once and for all that there's no swimming pool in here," Andrea whispered. A sign on the door to the teacher's lounge said, "Pool party today at 3 p.m. I looked up and down the hallway. "The coast is clear," I whispered. "Let's go." I put my hand on the doorknob. "Don't open that door," Michael whispered urgently. "Why not?" I whispered back. "In horror movies, In horror movies, whispered Michael, whenever somebody opens a door, a monster jumps out and kills everybody. This isn't a horror movie, Alexia told Michael. Chill. I opened the door a crack. It was completely dark inside the teacher's lounge. Turn the light on, whispered Andrea. I don't know where the switch... I didn't get the chance to finish my sentence because the weirdest thing in the history of the world happened. Something fell on my head. A bunch of things fell on my head. Snakes! I screamed. They're going to eat me! Ugh, there were slimy, disgusting snakes all over me. I thought I was going to die. Eek! Screamed Emily. Help! Screamed Alexia. Run for your lives! Screamed Neil. We were all yelling and screaming and freaking out. That's when I realized something. The snakes were fakes. A light went on inside the teacher's lounge. I looked around the room. Miss Binks was in there, so was Miss Rupee, Mr. Loring, Miss Hannah, and a few other teachers. They were sitting there drinking coffee, which is what grown-ups always do when they're sitting around. Nobody knows why. Ha ha ha, shouted Miss Binks. We got you again. That's another point for the teachers. Grr. Chapter 8, The Prank Hall of Fame. When I got home from school, I told my parents the teachers were clobbering us in the prank war. It looked like we were going to lose for sure. That meant no candy party, and the teachers would get a hot tub. Bummer in the summer. It's not fair, I complained. Why don't you go get goofy gifts, my dad suggested. It has all kinds of silly stuff. Maybe they have some things that will help you pull pranks on Miss Banks. Of course. Goofy Gifts is a store that sells goofy gifts, so it has the perfect name. Didn't somebody give you a Goofy Gifts gift card for your birthday, asked my mom. That's right. My aunt gave me a $25 gift card. I forgot all about it. I called up Ryan and we went to Goofy Gifts together. It's a really big store and they sell all kinds of junk. We walked around for a while until I saw a wall filled with silly gifts like whoopee cushions, sneezing powder, and joy buzzers. It was amazing. They even had lollipops shaped like poop. They were called lollipoops. Look at this great stuff, marveled Ryan. It might as well be the Prank Hall of Fame. This is going to score us tons of points, I told him. We're sure to win the prank war now. We had $25 to spend. The prank gifts were pretty cheap, so we could get a bunch of them. I got a shopping basket. Ryan put some itching powder in the basket. I put in a can of fart spray. Ryan put in a dribble glass and a ball of lollipoops. I put in some fake ice cubes with bugs inside them and a stink bomb. We also threw in some fake mustaches, a squirter calculator, a skunk-scented candle, and a can of dehydrated water. Ryan picked up a rubber chicken. What are you going to do with that? I asked him. I don't know, he replied. You can always use a rubber chicken. We totaled up our stuff. It was exactly $25. This is going to be great, Ryan said as we got in line to pay. We're going to get Miss Banks good, I replied. This line was long, but they had a bunch of cashiers, so it moved fast. Soon we were at the front of the line. Next customer, a lady shouted. And you'll never believe in 1,100,000 years who was standing behind the cash register. It was Miss Banks. No! Quick, I whispered to Ryan, hide the basket. You hide the basket, Ryan whispered. I can't hide the basket, I whispered back. Let's make a run for... But I didn't get the chance to finish my sentence because Miss Banks spotted us. This was the worst thing to happen since TV turn-off week. I wanted to run away to Antarctica and go live with the penguins. AJ, Ryan, she said, what are you boys doing here? I tried to hide the basket behind my back, but the bag of lollipoops fell on the floor. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I had to think fast. Oh, nothing, I replied. What are you doing here, Miss Banks? I work here after school, she told us. It's hard to make ends meet on a teacher's salary. Did you want to buy those lollipoops? They're on sale today. Buy one, get one free. No thanks, Ryan said. We just stopped by to say hello. Yeah, hello, I said. I'll see you boys at school tomorrow, said Miss Banks. Next customer. We put the prank stuff back on the shelf and ran out of there. The next day would be Friday, April Fool's Day, the last day of the prank war. I went to bed desperately trying to think of pranks to pull on Miss Banks. I thought and thought and thought until I thought my brain would explode. Finally, I fell asleep. Chapter 9, April Fool's Day. When we walked into class on Friday morning, the bell in the hallway started to ring. Ring! Oh no, shouted Miss Banks. It's a flood drill. Quick, everybody take off your shoes and socks. Very funny, said Alexia. No, I mean it, shouted Miss Banks. It might be a real flash flood this time. Yeah, right, I scoffed. Ring! Hurry, yelled Miss Banks. Roll up your pant legs, grab your notebooks, and climb up on your desks. Forget it, said Ryan. We're not falling for that old prank again. Yeah, said Andrea. We weren't born yesterday. Huh? If we were born yesterday, we would be 1 day old. Babies don't go to school. Bring! That's when the weirdest thing in the history of the world happened. I looked out the window. Well, that's not the weird part. I looked out the window all the time. The weird part was what I saw out the window. It was a wave, a wall of water, and it was coming straight toward the school. It is a flash flood, I shouted. It's not a prank. AJ's right, shouted Neil. I'm scared, yelled Emily. We were all scared. The wall of water rolled across the playground and came shooting through the open windows of our class. Water was pouring into the room. Bring! Run for your lives, Neil shouted. No time for that, shouted Miss Banks. Climb on your desk. We'll ride them like surfboards. Use your notebook as a paddle. But it was too late. The water was up to my waist now. Books and backpacks were floating all over the room. We would have to swim if we were going to make it out of there alive. Everyone stay calm, shouted Miss Banks. Help, someone shouted. I told you flash floods are dangerous, Andrea shouted. You can't see them coming until they're right on top of you. That doesn't matter now, I shouted. We've got to swim out of here. Somebody open the door. Glub, glub. Emily glubbed as her head dipped below the water. I can't swim. Grab my hand, Emily, Andrea shouted. I'm drowning, screamed somebody. I want my mommy. I can't breathe, shouted Neil. Where are the straws? Everybody was yelling and screaming and freaking out. Then suddenly, the alarm stopped ringing, and you'll never believe what happened next. I woke up. Ha ha ha, none of that stuff happened. I made up the whole chapter. I can't believe you actually fell for it. I got you good. Na 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 boo boo on you. Chapter 10, the real April Fool's Day. Finally, it was the real Friday, April Fool's Day. The prank war was just about over. The teachers were winning by a score of 15-9. It was hopeless. They would get a hot tub, but we wouldn't be getting a candy party. Bummer in the summer. All of us were sad. One by one, we trudged into the classroom. Congratulations, I grumbled to Miss Banks. I guess you teachers won the prank war. Happy April Fool's Day. Oh, today isn't April Fool's Day, she replied. Today is March 32nd. What? I didn't know March had 32 days, Ryan said as he sat down. Oh, yes, absolutely, said Miss Banks. At that moment, our science teacher, Mr. Docker, walked by the room. Oh, Mr. Docker, shouted Miss Banks. How many days are in March? 32, of course, he replied. You see, due to the Earth's rotation and the pull of gravity at the equator, we have to add an extra leap day every 4 years to adjust for the blah, 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 blah. I had no idea what he was talking about, but Mr. Docker knows about science stuff, so he must be right. If there are 32 days in March, I said, that means we have one more day left in the prank war. We can still catch up with the teachers and win a candy party. Yay! Everybody shouted, which is also yay backward. We were all high-fiving each other. The only one who didn't look happy was Andrea. Wait a minute, she said. I remember the poem we learned in 3rd grade. 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31 except February, which has... March doesn't have 32 days, shouted Neil. Miss Banks is pranking us again. That means today isn't the 32nd day of March, yelled Alexia. It's the first day of April. April Fool's Day. Ha ha ha, laughed Miss Banks. Got you again. We pranked you good, said Mr. Docker. Score another point for the teachers. Grr. At that moment, an announcement came over the loudspeaker. All 4th grade classes report to the all-purpose room. We lined up in a single file. When we got to the all-purpose room, Mrs. Stoker was up on the stage. Next to her was a scoreboard. Teachers 16, students 9. They had beaten us fair and square. What a humiliation! No candy party for us. This was the worst thing to happen since National Poetry Month. We were the saddest group of kids in the history of the world. Well, said Miss Stoker, the prank war is over and the winner is, of course, the teachers. Yay! Shouted all the teachers. Boo! Shouted all the kids. The teachers were hooting and hollering and high-fiving each other like they had just won a Super Bowl. Teachers rule! Kids drool! Shouted Miss Banks, cupping her hands around her mouth. Na 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 boo boo on you! Hot tub! Hot tub! Hot tub! The teachers started chanting. Teachers can be so immature, said Andrea. Okay, simmer down, said Miss Stoker. I have an announcement to make. Everybody simmered down. All of you did a great job in the prank war, said Miss Stoker. So I made a decision. Even though the students lost, we're going to have a candy party anyway. What? Yay! I was going to give you kids a candy party no matter who won the prank war, said Miss Stoker. Ha ha ha, I pranked you. Good. Happy April Fool's Day. I didn't care if she pranked us. The only thing that mattered was that we were going to get candy. We were all yelling and screaming and high-fiving each other like we had just won the Super Bowl. Miss Lazar, our custodian, came out with a wheelbarrow full of candy. Milk Duds and Kit Kats and Snickers and Tootsie Pops and those little bite-sized Milky Ways. It was like Halloween. I had never seen so much candy in my life. Miss Lazar passed it out to all the classes. I unwrapped a Twix bar. It looked good. I was about to put it in my mouth when I stopped. Wait a minute, I said. How do we know this candy is real? Yeah, said Michael. It could be fake candy. It's probably made out of rubber, said Neil, or sponge, or soap, or something like that. I'm not eating that fake candy, said Ryan, and he'll eat anything. It's a trick. The teachers are pranking us again. Nice try, said Alexia, putting a Snickers back in the wheelbarrow, but we're not falling for it. We refused to eat the candy. Miss Stoker insisted it was real, but none of us were buying it. The teachers had tricked us so many times, I didn't trust anybody anymore. I looked around and saw kids in the other classes gobbling down candy like they hadn't eaten anything in days. They looked really happy. Maybe it was real candy. I took a tiny little nibble of my Twix to see if it was just a potato covered in chocolate. And you know what? It was real. I took another bite and another, and then I stuffed my face with as much candy as I could hold. I thought I was going to throw up. It was the greatest day of my life. In the middle of the candy party, Andrea stood up like she had a big announcement to make. Well, I guess it's time, she said. Time for what? I asked. Time for Miss Stoker to bungee jump off the roof of the school while wearing a pink tutu, said Andrea. That's right. I had forgotten she was going to do that. Bungee, 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 we started chanting. Miss Stoker told us to simmer down. Everybody return to your classes, she said, and get ready for first period. But you said you would bungee jump off the roof of the school while wearing a pink tutu, complained Andrea. I don't have a tutu, said Miss Stoker, or a bungee cord. Miss Hannah, our art teacher, stood up. Here's a tutu, she said, holding it up. I made it during my free period. Then Miss Lazar, our custodian, stood up. I have the bungee cord all set up on the roof, she said. It's ready to go. Everyone was excited to see Miss Stoker bungee jump off the roof. Even the teachers were excited. Bungee, 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 we chanted. Mrs. Stoker stood there with a frightened look on her face. Then she crossed her arms in front of her. Well, I'm not doing it, she said, and that's final. All right, kids, if you got to chapter 10 and you're still reading along, congratulations. If you want to see the rest of the story, comment now and tell me so that I'll know to record the rest. Because, guys, this was a long story. I'm not recording this just for fun. Later, Gators. Learn, grow, and let the stories flow. Happy April Fool's Day.